Hello, everybody. You have just tuned in to the Steel City Blitz Steelers Podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And I have to tell you guys in the audience that like 15 minutes ago, I checked Twitter and Terry Bradshaw was trending near the very top. Now, there was a time when I saw that and I just automatically assumed that he had said something stupid. And this particular time, I had this heart palpitation that maybe it was finally here, that he had passed away. And for those of you that don't normally listen to the show, he was like my favorite Steeler growing up. And it turns out that, in fact, he did say something stupid. He apparently ripped on the quarterback from Texas or something because they open against his alma mater, Louisiana Tech. So all's good with Terry. He's still kicking, and I couldn't be happier that he's still saying stupid things. So moving on, Ben joins me, and back from his absence is Ian. Ian, let's start with you. How are things in Western Pennsylvania?
They're good. We finally got to some summer weather here out of like spring weather. It was the 60s and rainy for like 9 straight days, but the past couple of days it's been like 80 and sunny. So it's actually summer here now.
Same here. We went through just a brutal spring and constant rain and everything else. And we too have had some great days in the 80s now. It does feel like summer. And I know, Ben, I know the kind of same thing was going on there with you in Oregon. You had some real hot weather there for a while, and it seems to have gotten a bit better. And so hopefully it's continuing that way, maybe. I don't know.
No. Yeah, you guys sent us your shitty weather.
Oh, well, I'm glad I blew it west instead of the usual prevailing, which goes the other way. But hey, let's enjoy that bad weather. Anyway, the the dead period is upon us, as I said last week. And look, the dead period is good when it's quiet in Steeler land, because in the past few years, we've had to deal with a few things, and many of you have probably already
That's putting it lightly.
Yeah. Many of you have already seen Le'Veon Bell having jewelry stolen from his 2 girlfriends, and when he was asked to describe what they were wearing, he said nothing. They were naked last time I saw him. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up with this guy. So I'm just so glad that he's not a Steeler anymore, and that's a big reason why. But anyway, so not a ton to talk about, but the Steelers did announce that on July 27th, they'll be inducting a new class into their Hall of Honor. That is something that started a couple years ago, and we're going to get much more in depth in that in a little bit later part of the show. Because the thing we wanted to talk about first, and we alluded to it last week, but we wanted to kind of go a little more in depth, especially when you look at some of the other guys that are into the final year of their contract. But we wanted to talk a little bit more about Javon Hargrave. And, Ian, you weren't with us last week, and were you pretty high on Hargrave coming out of South Carolina State like we were too?
I was actually. Yeah. I have a very fond memory that I called that pick on Twitter, like at the beginning of the 3rd round. I was like, well, I guess the Steelers are taking Javon Hargrave now. And then like 20 minutes later, they took him. So, I liked him a lot. I felt like he was one of the best small school prospects that year. The thing that surprised me really with Hargrave's career is that they really kind of just stuck him as that 3-4 nose tackle for a while and didn't let him flash his athleticism really until last season out of their sort of 2-down lineman nickel package look. He really didn't have a lot of nickel snaps until last year. And once, I don't know if it was that he didn't know the defense or they really wanted to get, Hayward into it most of the snaps, or they felt like Cam Thomas or the ghost of Tyson Alualu was somehow better than Hargrave. Actually, Alualu was good the first year, but last year he wasn't. That being said, I mean, Hargrave really flashed last year whenever he was able to play in that 2-down lineman front. I think I've talked about it a lot that he's a very good penetrator. He's very quick off the snap. He's very good at pushing the middle of the pocket. Where he's not good is at sort of stacking and setting the line in the middle and sort of getting that bull rush and stopping the push of the offensive line in a goal line situation. That's where you need that big hulking nose tackle like Casey Hampton was, or even some of the other guys we've had through here, Joel Steed, that could really just set the middle and there you go. There's a reference for you. That could set the middle and no one was getting through, whereas with Hargrave, he can get pushed off the ball in those goal line and short yard situations. But last year they started using him actually in the rotation for the nickel packages, and he really started to flash. So if they continue to use him that way, he is absolutely a key component of this defense moving forward.
Yeah, and we were kind of talking a little bit before we started recording. He's in that group with Sean Davis and of course Artie Burns. That is what it is. But there are some other guys who are going to be in their last year of their contract this year. And I mean, Ben, where do you rate Hargrave right now? I mean, you've also got the decision with Joe Hayden. I mean, where do you rate him as a priority in terms of getting him secured long term with the Steelers?
Well, if it's up to me, I extend him this year. I get it done before the price goes up, because the more time he plays, the more of an impact he's going to have, the more opportunity he's going to have to generate stats, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that's going to mean more money. And I lock him up now. I do whatever I can to get that done this summer and move forward. And, then you just basically – now you've got three guys you're paying pretty good money to.
Yes.
Between Cam and Tuitt and Hargrave, in that instance, if they did give Hargrave an extension this summer. So you may be in a position in 2020 where you have to make some decisions, but there's never a point where you can have too many good players. That doesn't really exist. It's just a question of fitting them all under the cap and then finding snaps for them and getting them on the field. So, I don't want to belabor the point. We talked it to death last week, but my preference right now would be to move forward with Hargrave and Cam Hayward, and maybe move on from Stephon Tuitt if he generates at the level that he's producing now. Sometimes he's a monster, and sometimes he's non-existent. So it just it depends on what happens this year. But I would make a proactive signing with Hargrave, because I think he's a rising star and is going to get better. And he's only got 1 year left on his deal. If you wait until he's unrestricted free agent next season, he's going to be very expensive.
Yeah. And
unfortunately, the Steelers have, when they've had a substantial investment in players before, similar to the situation with Tuitt now, they have tried to force that investment to come to fruition and let other players leave and or let them, stagnate from a developmental standpoint.
Right.
And I really hope that doesn't happen with Hargrave. And, we don't want to give Chris any credit at all for this conversation.
None.
Even though it was his idea. Piss off, Chris.
Well, I'm just, it's funny because I'm looking at some of Hargrave's numbers. Again, we're talking about a third round guy, a highly regarded, well thought of guy out of a small school, South Carolina State. He's played in 47 of a possible 48 games. He's got 39 starts. You just look at what he does from an interior point of view, and I totally agree. And it's what worries me is that if he does have another very solid year in 2019, I don't see the Steelers being able to afford him, which is why they've got to do something, I think, now. And I think you guys know this, but some of the listeners might not know. Of course, the Steelers have a policy that they do not negotiate contracts once the regular season begins. And that often is why so many times they do wrap a guy up, just hours before the season begins, something to that effect. So, I don't know if that's what's going to come to fruition with him, but he's obviously the type of player you want around on the field. From everything I know, he seems to be the type of player you want around off the field as well. So I do. I think he's up there priority number one type thing. Ian, do you agree that if they don't get him done, we do run the risk that he could be gone in 2020?
Yeah, I think he'd probably test the market, especially with Hayward and Tuitt both wrapped up. I mean, he's the kind of guy who has the capability to be a starter somewhere. He's probably actually best suited for sort of the not the nose tackle role, but the sort of other defensive tackle role in a 4-3, kind of like that Aaron Donald role where he can actually use his athleticism to get upfield. I think some 4-3 team would probably pay him a good amount of money. I mean, not Aaron Donald type money, but a very solid contract.
Yeah, and you got to wonder too. You don't know what type of discussions he has with his agent, and they very well could be talking about exactly what you just said. Unless the Steelers throw a boatload at us, why not test the market for a 4-3 team that's going to use me to a little bit more of my natural abilities and things. But that said, I think Ben, do we credit the Steelers with giving him the opportunity to do a little bit different, and not force him to be what the Steelers typically do and say, this is what you're supposed to do and do it?
I'm not sure I follow what you're asking me.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is the Steelers for so long, it was always, we draft a guy and this is what we want him to do. And there was very little freelance. You know what I'm saying?
I think when Tomlin brought him in, he described him as a penetrating defensive lineman, one gap penetrating defensive lineman. And to this point, that's what Hargrave has been. And he does his best work when he's in the backfield. He creates havoc. So I don't think that they're really asking him to be something that he's not, aside from when they put him at the nose. But even then, I mean, these guys are playing a one-gap scheme now. They're not playing the old two-gap scheme that like they used to play, except when Daniel McCullers is in there, and he doesn't play it very well.
No.
So, no, I think, they've allowed Hargrave to be who he is. They just haven't played him enough to really make him as effective as he could be, in my opinion. And I'd like to see some more there. That's all.
Yeah, what he can do with more snaps.
Yeah.
You're listening to the Steel City Blitz Steelers podcast presented by 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh. And the guys at 26 have a brand new shirt up for the next 2 weeks. It is a Pittsburgh Pirates themed shirt with buckos, and then it's got the year of their establishment on it and kind of the bats crossed in the middle. A very nice, traditional looking shirt. Very comfortable shirt, I might add. And again, this particular 2 week period, they are donating $8 from every shirt to Nolan Lowry. And again, his dad was with us here at SCB for a while, and his dad and mom are trying their best to get him a service dog. He's got a lot of emotional and other type of problems, and he just really, really, really clings to the dogs when he gets the opportunity. And all the help that they've been getting is telling them that's the direction they need to go. So get yourself a great shirt and do something really good at the same time. The Hall of Honor, as I mentioned in the opening, was created a few years ago by the Steelers. And, of course, the Steelers are not an organization that self-promotes its greatness like others do. Ian, you'll check me here if I'm wrong, but I think the only place inside the stadium where they have any sort of promotion about Super Bowl championships is just the flags at I believe, the south end.
It'd be the north end of the stadium.
Okay.
But yeah. Because the stadium opens out to the rivers facing south.
That's right.
But in the actual bowl of the stadium when you're in the seats, that's the only one you can see. There's obviously the Great Hall with the giant Super Bowl trophies and all that stuff. But within the stadium itself, that's the only place is the flags.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm getting at there is you go into other stadiums and it's like a Roman Coliseum where they have banners of their championships and everything else. New England comes to mind. They wear patches after they win, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But the Steelers,
or Indianapolis that raised a banner for just making the playoffs the one
year. we made the AFC Championship game and lost, but we were in it.
Is that like saying we made it to the Sweet 16 in college basketball? I don't know. But the Steelers have never really been self-promoters like that. And so they finally decided to come up with the Hall of Honor. And of course, the first class was massive, about 27, 28 people. And the rules are pretty straightforward. It's you have to have been a Steeler for 3 seasons. You have to have been retired or away from the Steelers for 3 years. And it's not just about players. It's coaches and contributors and things of that nature. There's some interesting names of potential entrants this year. Ian, who do you think is just like, this doesn't even garner us talking about it because this person is in? Who would you say is somebody like
that? So here's the hard thing that I have with this, that, I've predicted this wrong every year. So I'm going to caveat what I'm saying with that. They've really made a focus, at least with the initial classes, on sort of the older guys from the early Steelers history, 70s and before, that made an impact but are never going to get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And they want to find a way to recognize these guys. And so they've definitely made a focus on getting these guys in the Hall of Honor and recognizing them sort of before they've moved on to the more recent generation of players. So, this year you'll have recent players like Hines Ward, Troy Polamalu, Heath Miller, Casey Hampton that are all eligible. Last year, Alan Faneca got in. He was kind of the first guy from the 2000s class that got in. That being said, there's still some guys hanging out there from the 70s teams like Mike Wagner, Glenn Edwards, Larry Brown. They're never going to get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
No.
And the Steelers may take the opportunity to recognize them. Some of those guys are still alive, so it'd be nice to, be able to recognize them before they pass away. The 70s teams, like you mentioned at the outset with Terry Bradshaw, some of those guys are starting to pass away now because they're getting up there in years. So the team has made a focus on trying to get some of those guys. Like last year, I don't think anyone had Buddy Dial on the radar, but he got in. So, and then even guys from the 80s like Tunch Ilkin, Craig Wolfley, they've been big contributors both on the field and off the field with all they've done for the radio networks and everything. The Steelers have made a focus on off-field contributions too, obviously with guys like Bill Nunn getting in. And someone like Bill Cowher might be an interesting candidate this year too, that he's been away from the team for long enough that he could be under consideration. Some other guys from those 90s teams too, guys like Carnell Lake, Gary Anderson, Jason Gilden, who was the team leader in sacks for a long time, Greg Lloyd, Joey Porter, James Ferrier are kind of more into the 2000s. Those are kind of the top of the list as far as, guys who have had impactful careers. Some of those guys obviously still have a chance to get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame too, which automatically gets them into the Steelers Hall of Honor. So like Troy Polamalu is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer whenever he's eligible. Hines Ward's kind of a bubble guy for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, but he'll definitely get in, within the next few years into the Hall of Honor, I would think too. He may get in this year. I would say if they put anyone in from the 2000s teams after they put Faneca in last year, it would be Hines Ward this year.
Yeah,
which would be kind of a nice tribute to the guy who still manages to hold the Steelers' career receiving yardage and receptions records that Antonio Brown probably would have broken them if he would have been here this year. But he had to go batshit crazy, so Hines Ward still holds all the records.
It's funny you mentioned Troy because I think everybody expects that he will go into the Hall of Fame this year. So maybe they just wait on him and he goes into the Hall and then the Great Hall or next year, Hall of Honor. Ben, I have to ask you about Myron Cope. I honestly, I guess I would have probably listened to arguments as to why he could have gone into the first year. Does he mean that much to the Steelers
at some point?
Or is this his year, Ben?
Maybe. I mean, yeah, he certainly is going to be a guy that's going to be honored there.
Yeah.
It's just, you've got a bottleneck because they're only letting in, what is it? Is it 5 per year now?
Yeah, 5 per year,
yes,
unless someone's in the Hall of Fame, and then they'll.
Unless somebody gets into the Hall of Fame, and then they go in right away. They're automatically named. But unless you were a Hall of Famer before, you didn't get in, and they're only putting in 5 per year, so you got a bottleneck of contributors there. And Myron, yeah, I think he means a lot. I mean, we basically came up with a terrible towel, which is a Pittsburgh mainstay, and it certainly stands beyond the Steelers.
It's iconic.
It is. It really is. And you've got a number of copycats in stadiums and arenas all over the damn country now. So, that certainly is something. He did a lot of work within the community. He worked for the Steelers for a long time on the radio network. And, on top of the fact that they just liked him because he was a quality individual. So I think he gets in at some point. I don't know if it'll be this year. It's only, like I said a minute ago, there are only 5 guys.
Yeah. And
there are more deserving guys than will get in each year. So,
sure.
Mike Wagner, who Ian brought up before. I mean, how do you keep him out? I mean, he should be in now. Yeah. Bill Nunn getting in last year didn't really surprise me. I mean, that guy honestly should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, in my opinion.
And just for
Hines getting in would be nice. I don't think Hines will ever make the Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's just my opinion. I know that a lot of Steelers fans disagree with me, but it's really, really hard to get in as a wide receiver anyway. Yeah. And Hines doesn't have the numbers. There is no stat for devastating downfield blocks. That doesn't exist.
Well, unless you're 3-year Letterman on Twitter.
Exactly.
He apparently led all high schools in downfield blocking. But you're
exactly.
Right, no stat on that. 2 things. Bill Nunn, real quick, for those that are listening, you're not sure who Bill Nunn is. Bill Nunn was a scout with the Steelers and is heavily credited with finding a lot of the great talent of the 70s teams, especially the guys from the small black colleges and stuff. And I agree, Ben. I think there has to be a place for him in the Pro Football Hall of Fame when you look back at everything that he did with the Steelers. And, and I was going to touch on this in a little bit, and we'll get to it, this whole Steelers bias thing, because so many Steelers have gotten in. But, I agree. I think he should be there. And,
who was the guy from the Cowboys that just got in?
Gil Brandt, wasn't it?
Gil Brandt.
Yeah.
And granted, don't get me wrong, what Tom Landry did in the 70s and even the 80s was amazing. I mean, you're never going to see, and I hate saying this because it's a Cowboys coach. You're never going to see a coach ever again have 20 consecutive winning seasons ever again. And Landry did that. And Gil Brandt helped Landry build those teams. So, Gil Brandt deserves to be in.
He does. Yeah.
But if you just want to count up Hall of Fame players and say, hey, how many of these guys did Bill Nunn not only evaluate but identify for the Steelers in advance of those drafts, I just, it's a lot of players. It's a lot of talent he identified and got into the team. And I think for that alone as a contributor, he deserves to go in posthumously.
Yeah, no, I'm right with you. As far as the Hines Ward point, and all I'm going to say, and then I'll let Ian chime in here too. I think it gets tougher for him every year because the wide receiver numbers that keep coming just keep getting better and better and better and keep burying him. So you do hope that if it's going to happen, that it is soon, because it's only going to get tougher. Ian, am I right, wrong? Where am I on that thought with him?
Yeah, I agree. You're absolutely right. I mean, it took, like Terrell Owens, who, regardless of what you think of him off the field, it took him a few years to get in. I mean, he was a fantastic player.
He still shouldn't be in.
Ben is a huge T.O. fan, by the way.
It's not just because I don't like him personally. He was a team killer. He was. If you keep your team, if you prevent your team from winning championships, you don't deserve to be in there. That's a negative contribution.
He wasn't the one puking in the huddle in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, whatever. He's lucky there's no stat for that. If there was a stat for being an asshole, he never would have gotten in.
I mean, you know, the one counterpoint to that though is that the one Super Bowl he did play and he played with a broken ankle and was probably the best player in that game.
Best player on the field. Yep. Yeah, I know. I'm with you, Ben. I hate the guy too. He's a team killer, but he put up some pretty amazing numbers.
He did.
Well, back to the Hall of Honor discussion. You know, a guy like Mike Wagner, I agree with both you guys. I think he's more than deserving and very well could be that, you know, Buddy Dial of this year, that guy that maybe we don't see coming in, maybe gets in. Cowher would be really, really interesting. I mean, obviously, I think he's deserving. He's got a Super Bowl title and was there a long time, and obviously had some very good years. But that would be very interesting. And you know, the Polamalu thing, he's definitely kept his distance from the Steelers since retiring, and he has not really ever spoken a lot about it, and I don't really expect him to. But, you know, that would be curious to see exactly how that goes down. But one other thing I did want to, since we're talking about halls of honor and stuff, Ian, do you think Donnie Shell will ever get in the Hall of Fame?
He deserves it, but I don't think he one of the other things I was thinking about after, you know, we got done talking about the Hines Ward thing is that, you know, the Hall of Fame voters, the people who are actually voting on this, as people in the media, it's basically media guys, and as people in the media start to retire and their places get taken by younger writers who weren't around during the 70s, they're not going to recognize as much, you know, the contributions of those guys. And like going back to the wide receiver thing for a minute, you know, the younger crowd, especially those that are kind of heavily into the fantasy football side, really value the stats and the, you know, yards per reception kind of thing, which obviously Hines Ward doesn't have. They don't have sort of the same, I'll say, to use a sort of bad term, quote unquote, football values that, you know, some of the older writers have. So I think it's going to get harder with each passing year.
Yeah, I do too, and you know, I think sometimes you look at the what do they call that, where they have the veterans pick or something like that, you know, where they always have an older guy that goes in. Yeah, the senior committee. You know, I think, I mean, somebody's got to give an impassioned speech, and you know, we all love Uncle Ed Bouchette, but he isn't exactly the most passionate speaker in the world. But you never know. I agree. You know. Ben, Donnie Shell, in your mind, I mean, was he kind of an innovative type guy back in the 70s? Terms of how, you know, guy his size, his ability.
Was he innovative? I don't know. What he was tougher than hell and always around the ball.
Yeah.
He was just that guy. You know, he was smart.
Yep.
And, you know, not a fantastic athlete, but very good. I think he should be in. That's me. And that definitely is all about the fact that, you know, he played next to a guy like Mel Blount, who, quote unquote, made it easier to play back there. That and all those great linebackers and defensive linemen. All that's true.
Yeah.
But that guy made a lot of plays.
He did.
Yeah, and you can't deny that. You know, it's like, well, Troy played in a great defense too. He played on an historically great defense.
Yeah.
He did. And you know, he still made a lot of plays. And there were times when I remember Troy would do wacky things where he would turn his back on the quarterback and run to where the ball was going and guess correctly.
Mm-hmm.
And guess right. And Donnie Shell didn't do that. They played a lot more two deep safeties back then, but he was a guy who was always around the ball for whatever reason. Smart guy, not the best athlete, still always there. I remember him taking down Earl Campbell, and that's a kind of a career-defining hit.
Yes.
He took down Earl Campbell, who regularly ran people over, and sent Campbell out of the game. The game the Steelers, I think they won that game. Lynn Swann was also injured in that game.
Yeah. It's the one I always think about. When it comes to Donnie Shell, that's the hit I always think about.
Of course. That's the hit everybody thinks about.
Yeah.
But that was back when the rivalry between the Steelers and the Oilers was really good. It was hot.
Yes,
the Oilers never won or hardly ever won. And basically it was, I hate to use this comparison, but it was the Steelers versus the Patriots now. I mean,
yeah.
The Oilers were a very, very good team back then. They could have won Super Bowls if they hadn't had to go up against the Pittsburgh Steelers back then.
Yeah.
And the Steelers were just better.
Yeah, they were.
But yeah, I digress here. Yeah, he was a good player. He deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. No question.
And since I got you, what about L.C. Greenwood? Because he's the other Steeler that people talk about as far as he should be in the Hall too. Where are you on him?
He absolutely should be. He was outstanding, and he gets knocked because he played next to Joe Green.
Right.
How do you penalize someone for playing next to a great player? Should David DeCastro get penalized because he plays next to Marquise Pouncey? I mean,
nope.
Come on. Give me a break. You know, is that why Alan Faneca's not in the Hall of Fame yet? Because he played next to Dermontti Dawson and that made him better? Give me a fucking break. Come on. The guy was amazing. He was the best guard in football. Why isn't he already in the Hall of Fame? This is dumb. Why is this conversation continuing? Kevin Mawai getting in above all those the other three guys last year. Mawai was the last guy I would have chosen among the four players, the four offensive linemen that were up for induction last year. Well, he was also notably the dirtiest player in the league 3 years in a row during his contract, during his career. The guy was just, Yeah. Anyway.
Well, and you know, and I know, and Ian knows, that politics, even in a sporting Hall of Fame, politics comes in too. How hard do you politic for a guy? Who do you know? Where did you play? All that kind of crap always seems to come in. So that too. Ian, I assume you also believe LC should have gotten in or should get in.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. The one thing I think he kind of has working against him is just this mindset that sort of enough of those 70 Steelers are already in, even though he was a great player, and I agree he should be in. And it's a dumb argument to make, but I think that's the one thing he has working against him. And you mentioned Ed Bouchette earlier. They posted a video of Ed Bouchette's argument for Alan Faneca last year, which was stinking awful. I mean, I might be a little bit biased because I did like speech and debate tournaments in hye school, but I knew plenty of high school kids that could have given a much better case than what Ed Bouchette gave. I mean, he started with saying like, "Oh, the guy didn't miss any games." Like, don't lead with that for a guy who made the All-Pro team 9 times in his career. Like that.
It was horrible. I already got Ben fired up on the Mawai, so it was terrible. I mean, you're trying to get a guy into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and you get up there and stand like you're trying to sell somebody a used toaster. I mean, it just. Oh yeah! See, now I got myself wound up too. This whole Steelers bias thing. I guess we're biased because we're Steeler people. But if you've got that kind of talent, why penalize people? I mean, that's just the way it was back then in the 70s. You had fewer teams, and I don't know. It's just frustrating. I think what I'm really curious about is moving forward. How many of these Patriots are actually going to get in the Hall of Fame? Because as many Super Bowls as they've been to, and their 6 titles, I don't see them having nearly the amount of players get in that the Steelers had get in. Ben, am I wrong in thinking that?
They did have
or Ian?
They had some pretty good defenses in the early 2000s. I mean,
I think
a decent amount of those guys will get in. Like your Richard Seymours, and I mean, even Ty Warren was a great player in the middle for them for a long time. I mean, it was basically like him and Casey Hampton were sort of the two premier nose tackles in the league for a long time. That it never really got talked about, either of them.
Yeah, and Rodney Harrison, I know it irritates people on TV, but he was pretty solid. And Ty Law got in last year, right?
Yep, Aliquippa kid.
Yeah, there you go. So I don't know. I just hate the whole bias thing and everything else. But guys, we are less than a month out now from training camp, and we'll have a heck of a lot more to talk about when that gets going, between who fails conditioning tests and who gets hurt and who gets cut and who does this and who does that, and how many times can somebody show up in a helicopter. Thank God that's over. Do you guys, speaking of that, I saw something today. Terrell Edmonds played more snaps than anybody on defense last year as a rookie for the Steelers. He's supporting. Supporting is not the right word. He's on AB's side, somebody said today, I saw on social media. And does that affect the locker room, Ben? If you've gotten rid of a guy who made the locker room really awful, but you still got a guy in the locker room who has no problem liking what he did or liking what he's done, does that affect things at all?
Maybe. I can't say I'm not there. What I can say is there's a lot less drama regardless. And
definitely.
That, the player in question was a very popular player.
Yeah.
Who at times was paranoid, suspicious, thought the whole world was out to get him, would go on bizarre rants about how the media couldn't wait for him to screw up because they wanted to write something bad. And, they were just asking him how he was doing and how he was going with his training. And you guys want me to screw up. You want me to do something bad. No, man, I just asked you what you had for breakfast. Jesus. And other times the guy was gracious and generous and outgoing. And, like I've said a bunch of times before, you do the math. Okay. If somebody's manic, there's something going on with them personally. And I think there were a lot of things that might indicate that there were problems there that ran deeper than just, I'm unhappy with my quarterback. But that said, if you're that guy who's gracious and generous and outgoing and goes out of your way to make people happy, you're going to be a popular player,
right? At
some point on some level. So if somebody still likes you, nobody's going to hold that against you, I don't think.
Right.
If somebody still likes him, nobody's going to hold it against him. They're probably just going to be like, well, it's fine. That's your thing. If that's what you want to do outside of here, inside, that guy's gone, and I'm glad.
Yeah, I had to laugh. AB, did he post a video of himself working out in the dark last night? And like there was a whole bunch of people around, and I immediately thought back to that whole front of his locker rant about how he could never go work out by himself, even though he was always Instagramming exactly where he was and when he would be there to work out. Manic is the right word for it, for sure. Do those types of things worry you at all, Ian, or are we getting just way, way too specific in the types of things that go on in locker rooms these days?
I think we're getting a little too specific just because I think some of that rap on Edmonds comes from him liking some of Antonio Brown's tweets. And if I've learned anything on the garbage heap of Twitter, you should never criticize someone's likes. Don't analyze people's likes. Don't analyze people's follows. There's nothing there. I mean, sometimes I'll like a tweet because it has an article in it that I think might be interesting, and I just want to come back and read it later and don't want to have to scroll through and find it again. And then I read it and it's a trash article, and I'm like, well, unlike that, and I'm over and done with it. But sometimes I like things because I think it's a funny joke. There's people I know that, because I interact with them a lot on Twitter, they like every single reply that you give them. And it's like, sometimes you're just like giving them a thumbs up because as an acknowledgement that, yeah, I agree with you, and they'll like it. And it's like, why do you, some people have 10,000 likes because they like every tweet that mentions them. So, don't overanalyze likes on Twitter or Instagram.
No, I think it's a good point. And it is a trash heap. It's a necessary trash heap when you do what we do, unfortunately. But, it's fascinating in some ways how it delves so deep into, because one guy clicks a heart button on his computer or his phone or whatever else. It's just amazing to me. Ben, I'm going to wrap this sucker up. Do you have any parting shots for the evening?
Not really. Part of me can't wait for September because I love football season, and part of me is just like, the summer's just beginning. This is going to be great.
Exactly. I am right there with you. Feel very much the same. Ian, how about you? Any rants filling your mind tonight?
No news is good news. The only news we can get from now until training camp starts, unless it's a contract extension, is bad news. Just the less news we have about the Steelers, the better. It gives us less to talk about, but that's totally fine. No news is good news.
Yeah, I totally agree. And to all the Steelers out there, have fun, enjoy vacation, keep working your tails off, whatever it is you do, and enjoy being young, enjoy doing all that stuff. Just enjoy it and don't mess it up. That's all I got to say. But anyway, again, thanks guys, and thanks to 26shirts.com/Pittsburgh for sponsoring us. And again, get over there, get yourself a cool Buccos shirt, and do something good at the same time. Not sure if we'll have a show next week during the 4th of July week. Got to talk to the guys and see where we're at and go from there. But we will return right after that, if not. So make sure you stay up with the website, steelcityblitz.com, on Twitter at SCBlitz. And, of course, don't forget also you can check out the new online store at Design Tree. I put it in quick hitters just about every day, so you can find the link right there. So with that, I'm getting us on out of here. And, hey, go Steelers.
Ravens suck.